I never lost a fight like all these guys. The whole lightweight division been taken out, except for what's his name who just beat Ferguson.
Yeah, Oliveira.
Yeah, that's the guy right there. I'll fight that guy. That's who I'll fight.
We got some interesting news here. Nate Diaz had his exclusive interview one-on-one with Ariel Helwani, and he shed light on what he wants to do next and what he thinks about the 155-pound division. Frankly, he's never going to fight there ever again. He said 170 or 165, that's it. He'll never cut down to 155 ever again. But he is looking to fight 155ers up at 170, specifically only 2 fighters. He doesn't want to fight anybody who just recently got finished. Conor, Gaethje, Tony, even though he elaborated that he has a lot of respect for Tony Ferguson, doesn't care to fight him right now. He says not the time. Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira. Those are the only 2 guys Nate is willing to fight next. He said they're both the winners of the division right now. They're the only 2 guys right now who are winning fights. He said for Dustin, it's the right time to fight him because he just got a good win over Conor McGregor, and they were supposed to fight 2 years ago. He claims Dustin Poirier pulled out, didn't want to fight him, all that stuff. So that put a chip on Dustin's shoulder, and Dustin wants that fight as well. But that fight is probably not going to happen. Not because Dustin doesn't want to do it, but it's because the UFC will do as much as they can to put together Conor versus Poirier 3. According to Ariel Helwani, that is the fight they're leaning to next. They want to do the rubber match. No, it definitely should not be for a title that Ariel is constantly promoting. I mean, shoot, Dana, watch out because Ariel's coming for that job. And that's when you bring in Charles Oliveira. So Conor vs. Poirier is probably going to happen. Justin Gaethje vs. Michael Chandler is probably going to happen. They called each other out. It's a fight that makes perfect sense. The UFC would love that fight. That would most likely be for the #1 contender, regardless of what Oliveira's status is and his win streak or anything like that, because we all know Chandler is the new toy. He's the golden boy of the organization right now. He's the guy the organization is pushing heavily. But if Gaethje goes and beats Chandler, then they can argue that he also beat Tony Ferguson, just beats Michael Chandler. His only loss is to Khabib. Everybody lost to Khabib. The organization probably won't even count it against Gaethje and put him up in front of Charles Oliveira. Oliveira's biggest win and lone big win is Tony Ferguson. This leaves Charles Oliveira without an opponent. And we all know how the UFC does not like when fighters turn down fights. Fighters have been held out for a long time, shelved, put in a corner, all that sort of stuff for turning down fights in the past. And frankly, that's probably what would happen to Charles Oliveira because there's nobody else that makes sense for him to fight. And then enters Nate Diaz with a call out. This brightened up Charles' entire world. Because instead of sitting there and hoping for a title shot, which he's probably not going to get, unless there's some circumstances and something crazy happens that shakes up the title picture and they have to put in Charles, it's better to have a money fight, especially in another division where even if he loses, it doesn't do much against him. It's not his weight class, anything like that. Get that money fight against Nate Diaz, stay active, and more importantly than anything, a fight with Nate gives Charles the thing he doesn't have at the moment. It gives him a big fan base. It puts more eyes on him, especially if he beats Nate. If he beats Nate Diaz on a grand stage at 170, it'll cause some great exposure for Charles Oliveira, and that is going to influence, if not force, the UFC to have to put him up for a title fight right afterward. They like big money and they like big names. If Charles becomes a bigger name, not superstar level, but just enough where he's bigger than Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler and guys like that, that is probably going to push the UFC to favor Charles for a title shot. Put him up against the winner of Conor versus Dustin. That is why getting out there and fighting Nate Diaz at 170 rather than sitting down and hoping for a title shot is the better thing to do for Charles Oliveira at this moment. Not only that, in general, it's a big opportunity. Everybody wants to fight Nate because he's a big name. Money comes with that fight. Now, some will argue, why wouldn't Charles just fight Michael Chandler if he's going to take another fight with Nate Diaz? Because it's a different fight with a different fighter. Chandler is not a big name. He does nothing for Charles Oliveira at all. Charles is the top contender for a title shot. Fighting Chandler is just to keep his spot. Fighting Nate Diaz is more than that. Right, Charles is only lacking one thing right now. Exposure. A lot of people don't know this guy. Only the hardcore fans know about Charles Oliveira. He needs to cross over a little bit into the casual fan space, into the casual fans actually knowing his name. Michael Chandler has that a little bit for fighting on the same card with Conor and Poirier. He was the co-main event. Justin Gaethje has that for fighting Khabib. And now people know of him because he fought Dustin Poirier in the past. He's headlined cards before. Right, his debut fight was a headliner of a fight night. This gives him so much exposure, especially if he wins. This is a big opportunity for him to get what he wants in the sport. And number two, if he loses to Nate, even though it might happen, it should not hurt his chances at getting a title shot at 155. It's an entirely different weight class. So those are the differences between fighting Chandler and fighting Nate Diaz. The pros greatly outweigh the cons fighting Nate Diaz than it does fighting Michael Chandler. You lose to Chandler, you're done. You got to go on another streak to maybe get a title shot. This guy's on an 8-fight win streak. What happens if he loses to Chandler? Is it go on another 8-fight win streak again? Because he doesn't have the exposure. He doesn't have anybody who knows who he is. In terms of the casual fans, he needs exposure. He needs a money fight. Those usually come hand in hand. That's what he has here. A huge opportunity to fight Nate Diaz. And also, it's a fun fight. The fans are going to love it. Everybody's going to love Nate versus Charles Oliveira. That's such a good stylistic matchup. Good strikers, good boxers, great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Charles has better wrestling overall. He has way better kicks. But if he takes down Nate, Nate would be the only guy that can handle the grappling exchanges and actually make it more competitive. A lot of people like to talk about Nate's offensive Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, his ability to get the triangle chokes and the guillotines and all that sort of stuff. He attacks off his back, but he's not so much like Tony Ferguson, where Tony's a risk taker on the ground. He goes for everything. He's constantly attacking, not so much defending things, but constantly attacking. Nate, though, is completely balanced, very solid in all areas of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's a hard guy to crack on the ground. It's hard to break his guard. It's hard to actually be effective offensively on him, and that's where even Charles Oliveira might have a problem with. Charles is probably going to try some things out there, possibly gas himself out in 5 rounds, where he's probably going to get reversed here and there and all sort of stuff. We have seen Charles in the past put himself in very bad positions. Now, this is a younger Charles Oliveira, not in his prime. This is before 155. So that Charles may not be a thing anymore. When instincts kick in, and that's what his instinct has always been. Always go for the risk-taking moves. Nate is a lot more calm and patient on the ground than Charles Oliveira is. He has historically shown to be way better with defense across the board, from submissions to positions to transitions to reversals. That is why this fight is going to be so fascinating. Charles will take him to the ground eventually. He'll be very confident in his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to trump even Nate Diaz's, and that ultimately makes it even for a still an exciting fight on the ground. And on the feet, it could be very competitive, unless Oliveira focuses on a lot of leg kicks. They're in opposite stances, so if he throws lead leg kicks a lot, it could do a lot of damage. But Nate has gotten better at checking kicks. Example, when he fought Conor McGregor, Conor was in the same stance, southpaw versus southpaw, laying those power left kicks, but Nate had some nasty checks on Conor, right? He's getting a lot better on defending what historically has been his biggest weakness, and that was leg kicks. That leaves a lot of boxing exchanges. Nate is a better boxer than Charles. He's longer, he's a little bit bigger, he has more volume to his game. He's not the prettiest puncher, necessarily. I think Oliveira probably has better form in a lot of his punches, but he's not as effective. Nate will keep a jab and step off the outside for the long left hand. He would also pull back with the counter right hook. Oliveira's excellent at backstepping into the right hand counter punch. But what happens when he fights a guy who leans in with the left, you try to pull back and counter, and he pulls back and counters you with a longer check right hook? That's going to be a problem for Oliveira. It's going to cause Oliveira to have to be aggressive. He's going to have to get in Nate Diaz's face, and that is not something he's very used to doing. Oliveira is usually the longer guy. From 145 to 155, he's always been the taller, longer fighter in the cage, keeping the distance on his opponent. Not this time, man. And that could be very awkward for Oliveira's style because he's not a swarmer. He's not a combination puncher. He's not a guy that gets in your face and throws blows at you or tries to trade with you. He's a sniper. From front kicks to jabs to right straights, he attacks singularly. And he likes to move away after every single punch. He likes to take an angle after every single punch. And it's usually to create distance on the opponent. His front kick is essentially one of his best weapons. And it's only used to keep distance so he can fire out a jab or try to look for the counter punch as he backsteps. He can't do any of that stuff against Nate. So essentially, I do think Nate might beat Oliveira in the striking. Unless Oliveira just got so much better because his progression level is crazy between fights. He evolves so much every time we see him. Maybe he comes out with something different. Maybe he switches stances. If he switches into southpaw and fights very well in that stance, the game changes on Nate because the leg kicks become a huge problem now. And also that jab from Oliveira becomes a huge problem as well, right? Nate is actually excellent at taking away the jab of the opposite stance fighter. So who do I have winning the fight? I think Oliveira, through his wrestling, after feeling out a few rounds in the striking, starts to do enough just to win the fight, where most of the damage I think will be his way. I think Nate will cause most of the damage in the fight, but I think Oliveira will win on the scorecards, and some people might not be happy with the performance. So interesting fight, interesting news. Can't wait to see how this all plays out. That is the fight to absolutely make next. I mean, if Oliveira is going to be shelved, I mean, this is too big of an opportunity to miss.